As we all know, AI these days is pretty trending topic, especially with the chat GPT, right? People are crazy about it, do a lot of fun stuffs, and even I think intelligent way of using AI to produce something that is maybe insightful, meaningful, or even creative. So maybe let's try to highlight what other advancement outside of chat GPT that maybe you think are worth to share with the audience here who are not particularly following any kind of AI related topics.
Thanks, Henry, for asking that, because AI is really changing the world for good. And one example would be in detection of skin cancer. Human dermatologists can achieve in one study an 87% detection rate, getting it right, and AI 95% detection rate, getting it right. Interestingly, when you put AI and humans together, you bring both into the process, the accuracy rate goes up even higher if it's done in the right way. But yeah, AI has helped catch wildlife poachers, has helped spot Alzheimer's disease from cookie drawings. It's just helped us do so many other things, like the very tricky protein folding problem was solved through the efforts of AI. So it's not a 100% positive story at all in terms of the impact of AI on our world, but there are a lot of positives. There are some massive problems for us to solve as a species, and AI can really help us.
Yeah, especially things like for optimization, right? Where it's like very tricky for human to keep on banging their heads to find an optimal way. So AI with the computational powers that we have, I think will be able to provide that kind of optimization. But as you mentioned, it hasn't been always positive, right? There are some negative impact as well with AI. Things like, for example, the deep fake where people create some kind of fake videos with a certain maybe political or actor or actress, right? So maybe if you can share also what are some of these negative aspects of AI for people to be aware of?
Yes, there are so many different areas. I mean, one would be in newspaper type columns where misleading financial advice has been given. Another one would be in the rise of AI fueled bots. And we're very aware from, for example, the latest US elections or other elections around the world of the impact of bots on the election process and people's voting intentions. Also, there is the sheer distraction that there can be from people's high quality thought processes. So if you think about a student writing an essay at university, I know I've heard from several academics that many students have submitted essays that do seem to be a little bit chat GPT like, and there's style that you can sometimes tell. And one academic was telling me that they're actually uploading chat GPT responses to their own essay questions to the plagiarism software so that they can then have the plagiarism software test the human students' answers, knowing that if they do submit something chat GPT like, that they'll get found out. But of course, that lazy reliance on a tool to write an essay for you impoverishes the development of your own intellectual learning. So that time where you sit with a pad of paper or just with a Word document that's blank and really doing your finest thinking about a topic, if we are overly quick to hand things over to AI, then we won't be creating as well as we possibly can. There are more emotive areas where AI has really caused problems, which is if you look at adverts that are put out there on our social media feeds, and the adverts are often produced algorithmically now, and they're usually produced in that way. And I tell a story in my book about a lady who had sadly suffered a miscarriage, and she was a software developer actually, so very expert at able to block certain cookies coming through her computer. But she got chased around the internet, in her own words, got chased around the internet by AI-fueled ads that were offering her pregnancy products and baby products. And this is after this sad miscarriage had happened. And it was only a full reinstall of her computer, talking hard reset, that she was able to escape the effects of these ads. And that is terribly sad. And what's difficult, of course, is then the resulting question, who was responsible for this? Because you could blame the software developer, but then often the software developer is operating on such a narrow slice of the pie without the bigger context. Then you could blame the leader, but then how much of the detail were they in on? Then we can often get very holier than thou as consumers and say, yeah, let's at least blame someone in the company. But of course, we're buying these products. We're investing in these companies through our pension plans and other financial instruments sometimes. So it's a very thorny question, but yeah, the abuse of AI tools and the negatives are there for all to see.
Yeah, so you brought up a very accurate perspective of what is actually happening these days with all these interrelated technologies like internet data as well. We churn out a lot of the data these days from our devices, from our activities, browsing histories, and things like that. And also with the invention of new technologies or new startups or new products that seem to solve a certain problem, but they actually maybe putting two together, they create a bigger systemic issue or sometimes ethical issues, like just what you mentioned about the advertisements that is actually promoting a wrong product and might affect people's mental behavior and psychological thing, right? Which brings you to why you wrote the book in the first place. You want to be able to give more responsibility to leaders to be aware of such things and become conscious before putting technology or AI related invention into the world for people to use. So tell us more why leaders should have this moral responsibility to actually be more aware and conscious before they actually roll out these kind of inventions.
I think when you lead, you do have accountability. And it's interesting to think about the difference between accountability and responsibility. So you are accountable as a leader. And I suppose there are some leaders, sadly, who would shirk that. And maybe they're busy or not quite equipped enough yet for the breadth of accountabilities that they then have as a leader. And so that I sometimes see it's a rabbit in the headlights approach where a leader has been extremely proficient at a technical role or a more junior leadership role and has then got promoted and they're in over their heads, as has been said by others. So they are accountable. It's not about me putting that on them. Then the responsibility could be on them or could be delegated responsibility. But leaders, we are the ones shaping the world of tomorrow. We're making those policy decisions, making the decisions of where do resources get allocated. AI is an example of a technology that is very current, that is shaping our world in a lot of ways. Everyone's talking about it in business and not in business. And so leaders have that accountability right now. So my work is an attempt to inspire leaders to focus on the important role they have and to embark on a journey themselves as people that will maximize the benefit of their impact on society. Because if we don't invest in our own growth, then we can walk unthinkingly into a negative future.
Yeah, that's especially true, right? If people do not grow themselves personally as well, like knowing what is the impact of the things that you are producing or inventing and thinking about from different angles, right? Because sometimes we technologists tend to just work on the problems. We know what's the problem, we find a solution, and that's it. We never think of the implications of the second or third degrees of the impact of that particular solution. I think that is really critical for leaders to be able to think in multiple hats, multiple perspectives, and the systemic impact of certain things. And in your book, you actually mentioned this term called threshold leadership. So tell us more, what is threshold leadership? What is so different about this kind of leadership?
Threshold leadership absolutely refers to this systemic effect that you mentioned rather than a simple move from problem to solution. Threshold leadership goes beyond older models of leadership that have been mentioned. Like, for example, Frederick Laloux talks about the wolf pack and then the army form of leadership where you're very socialized into a certain values there of a public school or an army or a particular business. Then there's a machine form of leadership that's very much more transactional, if you like. And if then there's a family form of leadership that's come about more recently that's much more values led. And threshold leadership goes beyond these and is similar to a form of leadership Laloux also talks about, which is names with the color teal. Threshold leadership goes above and beyond these earlier forms of leadership, but also includes what is best about them. Ultimately, threshold leaders, they see themselves on the edge of something emergent. They appreciate the systemic richness and complexity that is around them. So let me give you an example. You mentioned about the software developer who might think, here's a problem, I'm going to find the solution. And I love the way you talked about, are they thinking about the implications? Are they thinking about the second, third degree implications? To think about those implications is hard work. It's complex to do. And threshold leaders enjoy this. They appreciate this complexity. They realize that they don't know everything. They're deeply reflective, but they're not so lost in reflection that they're powerless to act. But actually, they're progressing into a deep freedom to act in accordance with who they are becoming and what the world is becoming. As AI develops, the language models that it's based on then become part of our world. we don't actually know how human beings will then respond. For example, the next release of ChatGPT, we don't know exactly how that's going to change how people interact. If we're trying to predict what's going to happen in the future, we don't actually know the basis on which future AI will be developed yet. So futurology really is a fool's game. And so threshold leaders are okay with this complexity, and they're immediately going to questions like, what is the bigger picture here? How could this technology be used in the future? They're willing to prize these four pathways that I mentioned in the book. And this is essentially the core of threshold leadership, are these four pathways of cultivating stillness, embodying intelligence, thinking independently, and maturing consciousness. That's what threshold leaders do.
I must say, as a leader as well, it's not so easy to think that way, right? Especially in these days where you work in organizations, you have KPIs, OKRs, performance indicators, whatever that is. That number itself is reduced to some small set of the situation. So you actually don't have these KPIs to think about, oh, what's the systemic impact of your solutions that you're producing? I think that will be also a homework for all of us leaders here to also go beyond and always think, like what you said, on the edge, right? Not only on the solution space, but also think about the impact.